game was played between a master from Germany, Georg Gottlieb, and black was a guy named Akiba Rubinstein. Brilliant chess player from the early 20th century. Unfortunately, spent the latter half of his life in an asylum, as a lot of chess. I mean, I don't want to laugh at that, but it seems that it's been a topic of conversation. But even when he was there, he was contributing a lot to chess understanding for the entirety of his life. So this was a real chess wizard, Akiba Rubinstein. And he was kind of one of the founders of positional chess, if that makes sense. He was one of the, in his time, everybody was throwing pieces at their opponent. Rubinstein was a very calm player, but that didn't mean he didn't have brilliancies. And this game was one of them. So it starts out actually with d4. And Rubinstein played d5, and here white gave up the game. I mean, again, this move was so brilliant, it was over. It was over after that. I don't think I need to show you the rest of the game, do I?
No, I mean, that seems like a pretty big mic drop.
Yeah, it is. It is. So we have a queen's pawn opening. Raleigh plays knight f3. Rubinstein plays e6, just reinforcing the pawn on d5. Oops, I cannot draw that arrow. Rotlevi plays e3. He does the same thing. Now, what are the drawbacks of both of these moves? Like, what is the downside of developing like this?
Oh, yeah, blocks your bishop.
Bingo. Yeah, blocks your bishop, which, that doesn't mean both of them are stupid. It's just a way of developing that's a little bit more conservative. So, c5, Rubinstein, contesting the center.
This is Rubinstein. Of course, I recognize these moves, Daniel.
Of course. I mean, your long-lost freaking friend, Rubinstein. So c4, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6. Now you have this little box in the center, box of pawns, which looks very complicated, but really it's not, because everything is defended by everything. You see that this pawn defends this pawn, this bishop defends this pawn, so neither side wants to flinch. But Rotlevi does. He takes on c5. He says, I'm going to get rid of this tension. Okay, Rubinstein plays bishop takes c5. And here Rotlevi plays the move a3. What do you think he's preparing? He's preparing a certain move. What is he preparing?
b4?
Exactly. So Rubinstein plays a6, and you'll see the point of this move in a second. After b4, bishop d6, you see that he's discouraging white from attacking the knight by playing b5, because black is going to take on b5 and open up the a file.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, do you remember your game against one Erob? Do you kind of vaguely remember a trap that we had talked about beforehand, and you actually won as queen with that trap? Now, you got the move order wrong, but you got the trap correct. Rubinstein at this moment, in his annotations, the great Rubinstein, writing in Latin, and I quote, writes, and here I took us the exemplus from one Charlius against Erebus.
I guess that's Greek. In an asylum.
That's Greek. So after c takes d5, e takes d5, knight takes d5, why is white not just getting a free pawn?
Because we deliver...
Don't you dare get the move order wrong.
Oh, you just gotta give me a minute.
Sure, take your time. So, undefended pieces drop off. You know the theme. I think you're just trying to get the order right. Is that right? So
yeah, I don't remember it.
Okay, so here's the thing. First, you take his knight, and then this queen on d5 is a sitting duck. How can you exploit it?
You deliver the check on b4 from here.
Bingo. And then you take the queen. Yeah. Now, against Erob, I think you did this first. It was something along those lines. Now, what is the problem with taking the pawn first? Just to the topic of like the order of things.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, you can just immediately take the bishop back, right?
Exactly. Either with his knight or with his pawn, and all you do is win the pawn back. So for that reason, Rotlevi goes bishop b2, fianchettoing his bishop. Rubinstein castles. Thanks for the sub, Mr. Bayless. And queen d2 by Rotlevi. So I'm going fast through the opening because I want to get to sort of the fun part. Oh, sorry. My bad. So actually, Rotlevi didn't even take this pawn at all. He just left it on d5. He goes bishop b2, castles queen d2. I mean, they're just bringing their pieces out. Is this sort of making sense thus far?
Yeah, pretty standard stuff.
Queen e7 by Rubinstein, connecting his rooks potentially, and bishop d3 by Rotlevi. Now, take a look at this bishop on c8. Can you develop it much like White's developed his, except can you do all of that by force? So he doesn't play b6 here. he finds a way to develop the bishop to b7 and winning time at the same time. And to like do it all with tempo, if that makes sense.
Does he start by pushing that pawn to b5 instead?
Well, first you want to do something before you do that, right? Because here white's going to take the free pawn. So b5 plays
right.
into his line, but you need to do what first? And you can flip the board, by the way. We're going to look at this from black's perspective for the most part, so you should flip the board.
Okay.
So b5 is the second move of the line. What do we have to do first to make sure white can't take the pawn?
We need to bring the bishop to d7 instead.
Well, we're trying to develop the bishop to b7.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
So
Jesus.
you're right in thinking that b5 is the right idea, but again, it's your resistance to trading. I feel like that's a thing. Don't be so against taking pawns and pieces in order to get stuff done.
So you just take on c4 then to start
Exactly, because you lure the bishop here. Now you play b5 and you attack the bishop. So white has to waste another move moving the bishop back. You see what I'm saying?
it? Okay.
Bishop b7. Now we have basically a symmetrical position, except there's one small drawback. Or sorry, my bad. He doesn't play bishop b7 yet. You see this queen on d2? Can we make it uncomfortable? Can we make this queen uncomfortable?
We can pin the bishop to it.
Absolutely. How?
Well, at least,
X-ray.
we can bring our rook over to d8.
As he did. Now, this is also just a good move because the rook is occupying an open file. And you'll see that this was actually a serious mistake from white putting the queen on d2. So white wastes another move with queen e2. And after bishop b7 castles, Rubinstein makes another move that perhaps intuitively you wouldn't like to make because it offers a trade. Now, you see this bishop on b7. You see how both of these bishops are x-raying white's king?
Yeah.
Now, the problem is that this bishop is being blocked in by black's knight. And the other problem is that white has this knight on f3, which defends the area surrounding white's king. Can you eliminate both problems with one move?
Well, before I do that, I wanted to ask a question. Oh, never mind. I was going to say, why wouldn't we Greek gift sacrifice? It's guarded by the knight. I see.
Exactly. Well, let's set up that Greek gift sacrifice by taking the knight out of the picture.
Yeah, so we need to move the knight first here. So I'm guessing he probably moved the knight over to e5, setting up a trade with knight.
Bingo. That's exactly right. Knight e5. Well, white has nothing better to do than to take the knight. Bishop takes e5. And Ratlevi, precisely because he's trying to avoid ideas like the Greek gift sacrifice, kicks away white's or black's bishop with f4. Now, when you look at this move, do you see any drawbacks that it might contain? Any positional weaknesses? Like, does this move weaken any pawns, perhaps? Or open any diagonals? Like, anything you can tell me here?
Yeah, so a couple things I noticed. That e3 pawn got a lot weaker. It doesn't have any pawns that can protect it, and it's opened up the diagonal here. Dark diagonal on the king.
So how can we reroute this bishop to exploit that diagonal? Where can we go with that bishop?
c7, c7, then bring it up to b6.
Exactly. So he plays bishop c7, e4. Now, remember, the threat is stronger than the execution, so we don't want to rush with this move. First, we want to improve a piece that's not doing anything right now. We want to put it on an open file. Which piece am I talking about?
Right now, our a rook isn't doing anything, but I don't know. Do we put it on c8?
Exactly, we do. And we kind of x-ray the knight. And again, I want you to understand that not every move has to pose a specific threat. Sometimes you're just improving the overall position of your piece. It's not that this rook is going to threaten the knight. Well, the knight's frickin' defended. It's more that every piece is now harmoniously placed. Sorry, I was trying to remove the arrow and drew like 4 new ones in its place. So e5 was played, and guess what Rubinstein plays? Bishop b6 check. Now look at these frickin' snappers. So in this position, the fun begins. The game lasts only 5 more moves, but these 5 moves are absolutely stunning. Every one of them better than the previous one. So,
okay.
Black's knight is being attacked, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's
Rubinstein found a very creative square for this knight. Rather than just meekly dropping it back, what Rubinstein noticed is that white has a lot of undefended pieces here, or pieces that are very flimsily defended. You see this knight on c3 is only defended by the bishop. And you see this bishop on d3, right? It's only defended by the queen. And if we can eliminate this bishop, then this bishop on b7 is going to be completely uncontested along the long diagonal. So Rubinstein finds a way to exploit all of that and put the knight on a massive square.
I think I know it squares. Does he bring it to g4?
He absolutely fucking does bring it to g4. And if white takes that knight, can you see how bad this is for white?
Yeah.
I mean, everything is hanging. Rook t2 is a threat. White's going to get demolished here. So Raoul Levy says, no. I'm not letting you run freaking circles over me. He plays bishop e4. And he says, I'm taking this piece of shit out of the equation. But now Rubinstein finds a way to combine this knight on g4 with another very strong piece. Does anything come to mind? And think about this. It's not necessarily a simple move to see, but it's a very strong one.
Does he bring the knight to e3?
Good move. That would be a good move, but I'm going to give you a hint. He doesn't move the knight. The knight on g4 is actually very strong, but it needs to be combined with another piece.
Yeah, so he just brings up the pawn to f5 then. No, because it gets en passant and he can't do that.
Yep, bingo. So it's actually not the pawn, it's another piece. And we don't just want to defend the knight. We want to create a threat while we're doing it.
Yeah, so he brings the queen over to h4.
Bingo. Now, white obviously can't take on b7 because of checkmate.
Right.
But it might seem that Rubinstein has actually blundered because white plays g3. And here's the thing. We open up the defense of the h2 square. We attack the queen and we're attacking the bishop. Now, black certainly doesn't want to simplify the position, right? Because simplification is good for white. Then white's king becomes safer. And now Rubinstein played an absolutely stunning move. Now, I'm going to guide you through the thinking process behind this move, and I want you to try to find the move. So
Okay.
here's what Rubinstein knows. I didn't fucking talk to him, but I think this is what he noticed. When I say this is what he noticed, okay, I don't literally what he noticed. Now look at the bishops. Imagine a hypothetical scenario where white is lacking both his queen and his knight. Imagine that they're gone. What would you do in that position?
Well, if the queen wasn't there, you just go in there for a checkmate there.
Right,
at
but
h2.
I want you to specifically tie this into black's bishops. If the knight weren't there and the
Okay.
queen weren't there, what would we do?
You'd take that bishop on e4.
And what would that be?
That'd be checkmate.
That would be, well, with the exception of some bullshit rook f3 move, that would be checkmate. So the thing is, when you come up with an idea like this, a lot of people will say, well, that's not possible, right? Because my queen is being attacked, I have to attend to the queen. But what Rubinstein says is, I don't always have to attend to my queen. Some ideas are so important that you can sacrifice not only a queen, but even more than a queen over them. And so he tries to make this happen, literally. If you had the task of getting rid of two of these pieces, what would you start with?
I'd start with rook d3, actually. He can't take with bishop. It'd have to be a queen take.
Okay, but you're very close. But here I would take the queen, and we haven't made any progress as far as eliminating either of those pieces goes. We have to actually make progress. But you have the right idea. He uses this idea on the 23rd move. But now we have something that we can do immediately. We can take one of those pieces out immediately.
One of the troublesome pieces, so we just
Yeah.
take that knight out. Well, no. We don't take the knight out because then
Why
he
not?
just takes the queen.
Well, let's
Doesn't he just
consider
take the queen?
that. That's what Rubinstein does. Raoul Levy takes the queen. He's like, what the fuck you doing, man? And now Rubinstein plays another stunning move. Notice the relationship. We've seen this today in several puzzles. The relationship between the queen and the bishop.
Yeah.
Can you distract this queen from its defense of this bishop by using another one of your pieces?
Yeah.
And he sacrifices, literally, he sets the board on fire with this next move. If you don't like this next move, you don't like chess. I'm talking to the chat, of course. I know you do.
You know me, and I love Rubinstein, of course.
Of course, you were telling me about Rubinstein. I had to tell you to shut up. You were talking so much about Rubinstein. I was waking up, you were talking about Rubinstein. Going to sleep, you were talking about Rubinstein. Jesus.
Yeah, I couldn't help it. He brings the rook to d2 instead
Bingo.
of d3, right?
He brings it to d2. That's a
Okay.
distraction sacrifice. Notice that both rooks are hanging. And let's unpack this position for a second. If white takes this rook, well, then black can actually just take... Black can take the queen and mate, but taking the bishop is actually forced mate. Because if queen takes e4, what does black do?
Does he take pawn on h2 check? Brings queen over. No.
What can you tell me about this?
Oh no, that's still check. That's still checkmate, right? Yeah.
It is because
Yeah.
the bishop on b6. Notice how harmoniously all of black's pieces are placed, each piece fulfilling a very specific role. So for that reason, Rotlevi says, okay, I'm taking this rook on d2. And it appears that Rubinstein has blundered because this is not meth. Now, this is not checkmate. Why?
He blocks with the rook.
Well, if he blocks with the rook, we'll take the rook, but he can actually block with something else. What else can he block with?
He slides the queen over to g2.
He slides the queen
right?
over. Here's the problem. We might say, great, I win his queen. But remember, we sacrificed the queen. This is not satisfactory. What's the material count here?
He's up right now.
He's up in exchange, and we don't fucking want that after all these sacrifices. So Rubinstein made a move after which white resigned. Yeah?
I was going to say, that right there, then you fork on e3 and you win a rook.
But your rook is also hanging.
Still hanging.
And let me point something out. Even if you were to win a rook, the material would be equal. And after all that fanfare to get it just an endgame, wouldn't you agree that that's a little disappointing?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And here Rubinstein makes what to me is my favorite move of this whole combination. Because it's not a check. It's a quiet move that wins the game immediately. And I want you to, I'm not going to set it up for you. I want you to take your time and try to win this. The hint is that white resigned after this move. Like, this move was so strong, white gave up immediately. Up a queen and an exchange.
Does he? So the first thing I looked at, and I don't know if this is right because I haven't finished calculating it, but it seems like a kind of cool move, is he slides his rook over to h3. That gives the queen multiple attackers, but all of which you can still get a mate off of, right?
Holy fucking shit, you got it. I had to get
That's
up.
it?
That's it. That's it. Rook
Okay,
h3,
cool.
using the pin. And if queen takes c4, remind me of the move.
Now I'm just taking on h2.
Checkmate. There is nothing that white can do about this. He could play rook f3, but you would simply take the rook, and then it's checkmate. He could play bishop d4, you would take the bishop. And this would be a lot less beautiful than just resigning the game. I love positions where somebody resigns, like up a queen. So rook h3. Another possibility here would be to go rook c2 with the same idea. But rook h3 is infinitely more beautiful. So this
Is that what he played, or did he do the c2?
He played rook at Rubinstein. Well, what do you think? Are you not putting your fate in Rubinstein, my friend? Do I need
I'm
to?
sorry.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was just.
That was a bit
making sure.
ridiculous.
How could you ever? Rubinstein never made mistakes. Rook h3 is what happened in the game, and Rotlevi resigned. So just to recap this whole combination, it starts with knight g4. White tries to throw water onto the fire with bishop e4. You play queen h4 involving the queen. Now he comes up with a scenario where the queen and the knight are gone. So he takes out the knight, sacking the queen, takes out the queen, sacking the rook. And after this, we dismantle the queen using the rest of our pieces. The bishop on b6 is actually the unsung hero of the whole combination. What I want you to notice is that this move f4 lost white the game. It might not seem significant, but that is the importance of positional weaknesses. When you weaken your position and you create a long-term weakness, sometimes you don't even realize to what degree you're hurting yourself.
Yeah, but would that be something you'd consider in this position? Like, would you think of f4 as a bad move here if you were playing this game?
Well, white's already in some trouble because otherwise, as you pointed out, black has various ideas related to the Greek gift sacrifice. But when I look at this move, I immediately see how bad it is to weaken this pawn. Now, I'm not going to pretend that everything else was... Like, white had other chances to survive in this game, but I hate making long-term weaknesses. And what I also want you to understand is moves like rook ac8 you should start playing. First of all, sometimes you have to trade if that's what the position demands. And second of all, some moves are just general improving moves, okay? Maintenance moves, and we talked about that. Not every move has to create a threat. Some moves just bring the piece into the game. And in your games, I want you to try doing more of that. Sometimes the reason you're slow and you hesitate is because there comes a moment when you don't quite see how to attack. Again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. But when that moment arises, just ask yourself, what is my worst placed piece? Can I improve that piece? What are my opponent's pawn weaknesses? Can I pile up on those pawn weaknesses? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get you.
So hopefully you enjoyed this game, and hopefully it'll set us up for a finale in which you kick some butt. What do you say to that?
That sounds good, man. Can you bring us back 2 moves, though, before f4 was played?
Absolutely.
So what is the optimal play here? Just bringing the pawn up to f3 instead to take away the Greek gift sacrifice sting?
Yeah, I would say h3 actually to take away the Greek gift sacrifice because this covers the g4 square. Actually, the Greek gift itself is not so much threatened. Like if white goes rook c1, you take on h2, and here instead of going knight g4 check because the square is covered, you can win back the piece with what move?
Win back what we just lost?
Yeah, we can win back the bishop and we'll have an extra pawn. Again, take a very close look at white's undefended pieces.
Is it taking that bishop there on d3 and then you deliver
but queen takes. Oh, shit, then you want to deliver the check on d4.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
That is actually really nice. That actually is really, really cool. I might go king g3 here. So it might not be entirely clear-cut, and after queen g5, now I play f4 and I try to chase her queen away. But first of all, big-time points for finding that move. Oh, knight e5 here should win the game. Knight e5 here wins because you set up the move queen g5 with devastating consequences. Beautiful. I actually didn't notice that either. So queen d6 check was what I was thinking, and then you take the bishop. That's like the more vanilla option.
I get you. Yeah. I guess I was looking for, in the spirit of Rubinstein, looking for more
flash. That's fucking awesome. So I think that works. Oh, and one thing, and I think we talked about it a while ago, that if you do this, can you remind me of the next move?
For the Greek gift, now we're sliding the queen over to h4.
Now white has this defensive resource where he plays queen to d6, covering that square, but black is still winning with what move? Another one of those quiet moves.
You just push that pawn to e5, right?
Bingo. And you win either the queen or you deliver checkmate.
Yeah.
Exactly. Nice. So, for that reason, I would have played instead of f4. Oh, that was a bit of a long answer to your question, but I would have played h3 so that there's just no sacrifice. And, white can survive here. Black is better. Black has the initiative, but white is solid here. I mean, the game goes on. That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, it all makes sense to me.
Fantastic. So, what do you say you hop back into the pool for one or two more games?
Sounds good to me, man. Yeah, I'll get back to 1K tonight. That fucking tilt is rough.
Oh, trust you're talking to the fucking king of tilt. So, I'm not sure I can. A lot of people ask, how do you avoid tilt? Well, not sure I'm the authority on that matter. Oh, of course, Hylian and Traff. God damn, you're playing some intimidating guys here. H6. Interesting.
Yeah, I cut off the fried liver.
Okay, that's a move. Now he's gone d4. He's gone sort of for a version of the Scotch.
Yeah, but I still just take here, right?
Yeah, take. Now instead of h6, you could also play bishop out to c5. Develop.
Is that stronger than h6?
Yeah, because h6 is not developing a piece. But here you could play as you did against 1xqc. Remember you put the bishop on c5?
Yeah. Okay.
And so you're fine. Yeah. And if he plays c3, well, you could play queen f6. Well, actually, do you remember what I taught you in this position?
Yeah, right now I'm looking at going to f6, right?
Yeah. And reliving the glory days. Reliving the glory days. I can't believe it. He just lost.
That was still such a powerful moment in my career there.
Indeed. Smutter, thanks for the 5 gifted. Okay, so he's castled, but now remember, queen takes c6, then you want to develop your knight and castle. Thanks for the 5 gifted, man. Really appreciate it, Smutter. All of the support is awesome, you guys. I'm loving the hype. Thanks. All right. So, he's thinking about what to do here. You've got a nice solid position. Now here you want to be careful about where you put your knight. If you put your knight on f6, you walk into a very unpleasant move here. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Does he just push the pawn up to e5?
Actually, you have a tactic here. Look at his bishop on c4. What can you tell me about it?
Well, right now it's just totally undefended.
It's undefended. It's a sitting duck. So what discovered attack do you have? Think about
moving the bishop.
Where?
I see delivering the check.
Bingo. And you win a pawn and you get his king out.
Yeah.
And perfect. So that's the danger of taking with c6. Nicely done. Okay. Now, one thing I want you to remember, you did this sometimes in PogChamps 1. Once you win a pawn or a piece, you don't want to then abandon your development. You want to keep developing, okay? Because otherwise you might all of a sudden give your opponent, let's say, an initiative. Yeah.
So now when it comes to developing the knight, I don't really want the knight on f6 anyway, right? So for the queen, I just want to drop the queen back to
How about a forcing move? No,
what?
don't let him develop with tempo. So, what comes to mind? Sorry to cut you off.
No, all good. Well, I have to move queen or look for a check, but I
Check
don't
would be great.
see a check.
There is a check.
Oh, I can, yeah, I can just deliver this one right here on c5.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
absolutely. And if he drops his king back to f1, you actually have a beautiful move there. Look at your bishop on c8. Assuming he plays king f1, which I think he might, where would that bishop then belong? You have a square for that bishop that could potentially be absolutely devastating.
Right there at a6.
Bingo. So what would you do?
I'd look to push this b pawn
Yeah.
and bring bishop over.
That's like the fianchetto on steroids, developing the bishop to a6. My guess is he's going to play king f1. I don't... Oh, yeah, he is.
Yeah. So now I'm just gonna do this just like we talked about.
Exactly. And the
It's
great
a pretty
thing
similar
is...
position to what we just looked at a little bit.
It is. It is the bishop and the queen. My guess is what he wants to do is move his knight out. So he really wants to play knight b3 or knight f3, and he doesn't know what's going to hit him. I mean, it's like a runaway train, bishop a6, and he's going to lose a bunch of pieces there. So he doesn't have a great way of stopping bishop a6. If he plays queen e2 here, you have a way to reinforce the threat of bishop a6 involving that rook on a8. Do you see how? And he does. Do you see how to reinforce that threat?
Yeah, I'm just gonna push the a pawn to a5 and then bring the bishop over, right?
Got it. Yep. Now, the thing is, once you play bishop a6, he's going to play c4, but that creates this tension where his queen and his knight are going to be tied down to that pawn. And you can use that to open up more files. Like, you can basically freeze them in place. Welcome, Coach Peter. Yeah, so he's in big trouble here. Now, there are ways he can get out of this situation, but I don't know if Haile and Trav... Well, okay. Now what to do?
Well, I have to move queen here. Well, I mean, I could attack his queen, but then it's just two pieces.
Right, you don't want to really
don't know
trade
if
here.
that's
Now,
right.
notice that after bishop a6, he has the possibility of intercepting the diagonal with c4. Could you put your queen on a square where it keeps c4 under control so that bishop a6 becomes a threat?
Do I just drop the queen back to keep c4 occupied?
Yeah, exactly. Well, c to c6, right? So that c4 is under control.
Yeah, to c6.
Yeah, that's what just making sure you didn't mean queen c4.
No. I just meant like keeping c4 occupied as in like watching it, making sure it's like safe.
Yep. That's exactly right. So, but what he should do here is move his king to g1 and get rid of it. But it's not a move that a lot of like beginner type players like to make because it doesn't seem like it accomplishes anything. But he's got no other good way of stopping that move. This b6 a5 idea is pretty darn advanced. I like it. Okay, so he does this.
Do I want to deliver the check with the bishop here, or?
I would hold off on that. Now, here's the thing. What is he threatening?
Right now he's looking at this weak g7
Now,
pawn here.
it looks like if you give that pawn up, that'll be devastating for you. But there is a hidden benefit that you get from him taking on g7. If you can correctly position your pieces, what do you gain from that in the context of attacking his king?
He relinquishes any defense on the light tiles.
And what other file does he open up for you?
He opens up the g file.
So could you set up a situation where once he takes on g7, you bring your rook to g8 and attack his queen and occupy that file, which might potentially be huge for you? And
Is it
perhaps...
just... I was just going to say, is it just the standard development, going right to f6 then?
Bingo.
And then he take... Okay.
That's exactly right. And you're sacrificing 2 pawns here. That's a pretty big price to pay. But That G file, as you can probably tell, is going to be huge.
Right.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be tremendous. Yeah. And my guess is he's going to take the pawn because, like, once you played queen g4, you can't exactly shy away from that.
Yeah, so now I'm just going immediately g8,
Yeah,
protected
absolutely.
by knight. I lose the h6 pawn, but it's
Totally
great
fine,
position.
but that even opens up the h file for you, so it's a good thing to stack all these pawns. Now you want to complete your development by force. This is where it's a good idea to play that move you wanted to play for a while. Which is what?
The a6.
Bingo. And then you've got to take care of your king. Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna castle long.
Yep. And then you can start generating plans. Now, in terms of that open G file, once you castle, are there any plans that you can come up with to exploit that file? And it's a typical idea. You like this plan.
Yeah, it's just standard stacking rooks
Stacking.
here, right?
All about the fucking stacking. So where would the rook on G8 go in order to stack as efficiently as possible?
G6.
Exactly. Now notice also, for the future, if he ever pushes this e-pawn out to e5, first of all, there's going to be checkmate on g2. Second of all, well, he goes bishop g5, so he literally forces you to make the correct move.
Of just bringing the rook out, yeah.
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 And notice that once you stack, his bishop on g5 is going to be hanging. He's going to have to move that bishop, and then you're going to take on g2 with potentially devastating effect. There's actually some Rubinstein-esque ideas there. This might be a beautiful win if you play this right. He's probably going to play queen h4. That's essentially his only move.
Yeah. But I'm still stacking. That doesn't change the idea.
Now, my guess is he's going to think he's smart and take your knight. But are you taking back that knight, or do you have your eyes on a greater prize?
You mean taking back the bishop?
Yeah, do you take back the bishop, or do you have a better move in mind?
Well, I just immediately slide the rook up there and take on
Absolutely.
g2, right?
And while it's not checkmate yet, it's going to be very close to checkmate. So you absolutely want to trust that you're going to have checkmate there. Do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so, whoa, there is some really cool shit going on here. There is like an ultimate five-head move here. There's actually a couple really cool ideas. So, what comes to mind for you here? So, let me guide your thinking. You see this pawn on e4. If you could eliminate that pawn, that would pave open that huge long diagonal. Now, the problem is his pawn is defended by, first and foremost, the queen. Could you slice off the connection between his queen and his pawn?
Yeah, I just bring up... I don't bring up my g8 rook. I bring down my
Bingo.
g2 rook.
Exactly, so as not to allow that check on b8 to happen.
Right.
So we go rook g4, and once that pawn is captured, there's going to be hell to pay. So you see that sometimes you want to play simple. You don't want to sack queens. You just want to, meat and potatoes kind of move. Those can be the strongest moves in many positions.
But sliding his queen down to h7 doesn't... Well, I just take his queen.
Wait, whoa. But what does he do there? What was his idea of this move?
Well, it's attacking my queen.
Okay, so do you want to take their queen immediately, or do you want to maybe first make some preliminary move?
Okay, so...
That was actually a really strong move he found.
Okay, so I need to attend to this pressure here with my queen being in this position.
Now, where could you slide your queen in order to keep contact, potentially, with that pawn on e4? There's an amazing move here. Keep contact with that pawn. So you need to keep the queen on the same diagonal. But move the queen out to such a square such that the bishop can then come to b7 and stack up with the queen. It's a really strong move.
Oh, so I just have to go all the way back to a8 then.
Yeah, exactly. Now look at the queen operating from a long range. You don't need to keep the queen close to the attack. It's just as good, if not better, from a8 as it is from, like, f2. So he's actually defending super well here, but you're still attacking. Let's see what he ends up doing here. Okay. So he's probably going to move his queen somewhere to try to defend that e4 pawn. What do you think he's going to do?
I was looking at h7 for that queen.
Okay, that would have been correct.
I don't really see what that position does for him. Is it something I'm missing, or
Nope.
is that just not a great move?
Not a great move. Time
Okay,
to,
so now I'm still bringing the bishop to b7.
well, but you don't even have to do... Well, you can, but you don't even have to do that. You can just go ahead and immediately do what?
Just take it with the rook.
Yeah, take it with the rook, open up the diagonal, and then later you're going to bring the bishop to b7. But right now you don't need to do that. You see what I'm
Okay.
saying? I would pre-move queen takes c4 just to save a little bit of time. Now, he's probably going to block with his queen and think that he's defended, but there you have a beautiful move. Look at his king. His king is out of squares. Okay, now look at that knight on f3. You want to be very careful about how you attack that knight. Because if you play bishop b7, what move does he have?
If I go bishop b7,
Yeah, what move does he have there?
I don't really see what that would relinquish, because
Well, it
does
relinquishes
he
a
bring
square.
rook over to f1?
Yeah,
He
so
brings
you
rook to
can
f1?
attack the knight in such a way that he doesn't have rook f1. Do you see a square?
Yeah, I just bring the bishop over to e2 then, yeah.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. That's exactly what you do.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if this guy was real 5-fed, he would play rook f1 anyway. That's not really a 1000-level move. But, I mean, otherwise you basically checkmate him. So let's see whether he does that. Now, after he plays rook f1, let's imagine that he does that. You don't even have to rush taking his rook because he's paralyzed. Now, could you then find a way to maneuver your rook onto such a square that it attacks the knight?
Yeah, I'm just gonna do a little rook lift, right? So I'd bring it over to g6, and then I'd take bishop and have it attack the knight.
Right, but the problem with rook g6 is that he's going to move his bishop back. So could you lift the rook onto a square where it's not that the square's not defended? Wow, this guy is really good.
Yeah, the right one is g4.
Bingo.
Right?
Bingo. Yeah. And then f4, and he still has a defense here. If he finds this move, well, I don't know. I'm gonna start being... I mean, he's got to stop the move rook f4 with what move? It's the only way to stop rook f4.
He's got to move the bishop, right? He's got to bring bishop over to e5.
Exactly. And then, well, you could always take his rook. Okay, well, he misses it. He kind of sends you toward that square.
Yeah, he didn't find it, so I'm just still going f4, and that's going to be game, right?
Yeah,
really
exactly.
Not a lot he can do here.
Yeah, you're just going to take everything here, yeah. I'm going to take all of his pieces.
What was the defense?
Bishop e5. Using the bishop...
After that, I meant.
Oh, like what would have been your move after bishop e5?
Yeah, sorry.
You would have probably like gone d6 and chased that bishop away. You're still like, I mean, the attack is still devastating. He's paralyzed, so you would have just slowly. Maybe after the game, I'll show you what the methods would be in that position. But you would have to exercise some like deep calculation and good attacking technique. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what comes to mind here?
How
do you take it?
What I was going to say with bishop, right? Because it's check. He can't take my queen with rook.
Right, but then he moves his king. Now, think about taking the knight with a rook. What happens if you take the knight with your rook?
There's no check, but I am attacking the queen.
And you're preparing a discovered check, which is going to be totally devastating.
Okay,
so
it is
you
the
want
rook
to
instead of
spring
bishop.
open. Yeah, you want to prepare the discovered check. That's going to be the strongest device in these positions. So if he takes on e2 with the rook, trying to counterattack your queen, you have a checkmate in 2 moves that involves a double check.
Yeah, it's bringing the rook to h3, right?
Bingo. Exactly.
And then after that, the checkmate is sliding it. Oh, okay.
Yeah, then queen. Well, okay. So has he stopped you from doing that?
No, I still just take on h3 because he can't
Bingo.
take with queen. It's pinned.
Using the pin. Now you're going to use the pin again here shortly to win the game. He's going to bring his king to g1. Do you see any other good checks in that position? Any other checks? Scour the board for checks.
Yeah, the best check I see here, I think, is going to e3.
Nice.
He's
got to block with his queen, right?
Yeah.
And remember something we talked about during the puzzle. When the king defends a piece, that's a very flimsy defensive mechanism. You can separate the two very easily by giving a check to the king. Now, which check am I talking about?
I deliver the check with the rook at g3.
Bingo. King has to move because of the pin, and then you take the queen. You can even pre-move queen takes f2 if you want.
I won't get too wild here.
Exactly. No, you can mate them without taking the queen, but that's not necessary. And he's resigned.
That makes sense.
999.
That was a pretty wild game.
It was. I mean, I think that like finding bishop takes f2 is crucial, and he defended tremendously well. Like, I honestly, when you sacked the knight and played rook takes g2, I expected the attack to just like go very quickly, but he actually found a bunch of very nice defensive resources.
Yeah, that was a good game. Oh, I brought him down to 999 as well. Poor guy. Man's punching air.
Oh yeah, you brought him below 1,000. You brought him below 1,000.
That's always a fucking dagger when that happens, man.
Indeed, indeed.